Welcome back to the Idaho 97 podcast. So we took a little break to work on our voter guide, and that is what we're going to talk about today because there's an important Idaho Republican primary election coming up in just a few more weeks on May 17th. I am Nathaniel Hoffman. I'm one of the co-founders of the Idaho 97 project, along with Emily Walton, and we're here with Mike Satz, our director, and Alicia Abbott, North Idaho voter contact and extremism expert. Maybe I got that wrong. I'll cut this out.
I wear many hats. It's okay to get confused, Nathaniel.
I'm going to ask Mike real quick to talk about, we put out a voter guide on our website, idaho97.org, and it covers quite a few races, like lots of races. It was a lot of work to put together, and we're quite proud of the way that we have identified the extremist threat in each of these races. We think that that is a unique ad in the Idaho political sphere. And I'm going to ask Mike to talk a little bit about how we put it together and how we want you all to use it.
All right, you bet. Now, first off, I want to do a shout out to Twitter user White Sheep Ranch. I got some good feedback on videos. And so a White Sheep Ranch, I would like you to see that my giant head is now next to the Capitol. I'm not actually on the Capitol if you're watching this on YouTube. So, but thank you for pointing out how big my head is. I really appreciated that. But we do take feedback. If you guys have feedback for our podcast, let us know, and we do listen. So, as Nate said, this voter guide was an enormous amount of work. And another thing that I think needs to be mentioned is almost all the work was done by volunteers, or was volunteer work, unpaid work, to get this done. And so what we focused on is a little bit different. We had two goals. One is focus on extremism, which is what our mission is. And so we're focused on races that had extremist candidates in them. And then second, we wanted to make sure to actually give some information rather than just saying we picked this person, we picked that person. We actually wanted to give you some information to tell you, look, this is why we made this choice. And also maybe help you start looking into some things. If you want to see some stuff, you'll see a lot of folks on there or with the John Birch Society and things like that. We'll look into them and find out what they're doing. And you'll see why it's such a problem and why it's so problematic. So first of all, like I said, we were looking at extremist races, right? So if we had someone who we could identify readily as an extremist, and we have a bunch that we can do that with, we have our set group of people like Dorothy Moon, we have our set group of people like Chad Christensen and those folks who we know are extremists, and we have a lot of evidence to that effect, and so we could look into that. But also we looked into what they were saying or who they were campaigning with, and they use certain code to say we support certain things. So if they're supporting vouchers, well, we know they're against public education, or certainly their position is going to weaken public education, and so that will drop you into that camp. But also, those same people who will say that stuff are also campaigning with people that we know are anti-education. For example, one of the candidates for superintendent of education is what's his name, Brandon Durst, and how he is kind of anti-public education. And so if you're campaigning with them, we know what camp you fall in. Now, where do we not weigh in? Right. So if there were incumbents running and they were unopposed, we didn't weigh in those situations. And then there were other races where we couldn't support anybody who was running in that race. So we have a few out there that have 2 or 3 people who are vying for seats, and we can't support anyone in that group. And that's unfortunate. And so really what we need to say there is run for office in those areas. If you don't have someone that you like there that we like, we need you to start thinking about running for office in those areas. But that's kind of the short and sweet about how we picked our folks for our voter guide.
Right on. I thought you were going to say run away, but you were going to say run for office. So
no, stay in Idaho. Save our state.
That's right. All right. So thanks to Alicia's effort, we've narrowed this down to the top 10 extremist threats across the state. And we're going to just go through one at a time, and we're going to tell you which district and which race you really need to be paying attention to. If you're in that district, please go vote against extremism in your community. If you're not in that district, check out the candidates, see if there are ways you could support them. Tell your friends who live in those districts to go vote for them. Let's start with number 10. This is District 10 in the Middleton area. Just one flag, the districts are slightly new. They changed the borders because of the 2020 census. And so you may have unexpected names in your district, you may be voting in a different location. So definitely check your polling place. My polling place changed this year, and make sure you know what district you live in. So District 10, Middleton. What are we looking at, Alicia?
Coming in at number 10, we have the Senate race, Scott Brock versus Tammy Nichols. And this race is important for a few reasons. Scott Brock is new to Idaho politics, really. This is his first time running for anything. He may seem pretty far right on his website, but we know that Tammy is a tried and true far-right extremist. She's an IFF darling. She regularly speaks at John Birch Society events, and her voting record in the Idaho legislature is problematic and harmful. So we really need you to be aware of this red flag race. Scott Brock is the choice in this one. And I want to make mention, because we probably won't talk about it much in this episode, but there is an attempt for extremism to take over the Senate this primary season. And this is an example of that. Tammy Nichols is currently an Idaho representative in District 10, and now she's shooting her shot for Senate. And this is an excellent way to get rid of Tammy Nichols out of the political process altogether. So that's number 10.
Number 9, District 26, which it covers the Wood River Valley, Hailey Ketchum. This is another open seat in the Senate and a similar situation to what Alicia just outlined. Tell us about it, Emily.
Thank you, Nate. So this is a seat, exactly what Nate said, another situation where the extremists are trying to take over the Senate, because that's where some of their policies get stopped every year, thankfully. And so in this, we've got a person who is currently a representative, currently serves in the House, Laurie Lickley, and then she is running against a person named Eric Parker. So Lickley is trying to move from the House to the Senate, and Eric is a new person running, but not an old person to extremism. And so the thing you need to know about Eric Parker, and why we really do need people in the Wood River Valley to get out and vote against Eric is the person who is a militia leader, and he was the Bundy sniper. You might recall a very famous photo of a guy laying on some asphalt with a rifle pointed towards innocent civilians and law enforcement in Nevada during the Bundy standoff. We really don't need a person who's willing to do that to serve in our legislature. And so we're encouraging people to get out and vote against Eric Parker. And I'll hand it over to Mike for District 8.
Sure. And well, I think it's Lori Likely is how we pronounce her name. And one thing to add about Lori Likely is she's just a very solid leader and a solid candidate, and she's been in service for many years. She's someone who takes her job very, very seriously, and takes governing very, very seriously. And so there's strong positive reasons to vote for her as well. And so, yeah, I will be doing District 9, which is the Caldwell area. And that is a race where they actually have two incumbents now jammed together, Scott Syme and Judy Boyle, who are running. And so Scott Syme, he like I said, he's an incumbent legislator. He has strong conservative credentials. But what I will call, I'm starting to call these traditional conservative credentials, as opposed to these far right extreme and radical conservative credentials. In fact, it really should be radical conservative or radical right? Because I mean, even far right, but if you're taking it seriously, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's just let's work together here. And so Scott Syme, he supports education, he supports Idaho teachers, he's a veteran, a local business owner, and he is College of Idaho grad. And I'm going to show my ignorance here. What are the Colorado? What's their mascot?
Yotes.
The Yotes. Go
Right?
Yotes.
Yotes.
Yeah,
Wolf?
yeah, right.
I don't know.
Those all my C of I friends are now angry at me for not knowing that, but now I know, right? Go Yotes. And Judy Boyle, right? So Judy Boyle she is radical right wing. She's John Birch. She's been a long time Idaho extremist, and she actually went out to support Ammon Bundy at Malheur. How do I say that? Malheur, right? She actually went out there and showed up there. And so we're saying no to Judy Boyle and yes to Scott Syme in District 9B.
All right, I'm going to take the next one. We're moving out to Eastern Idaho Falls area, District 33, where Representative Barb Ehart. I mean, we're having all kinds of pronunciation problems today. That's another hard one. I usually try to pronounce people's names right, but honestly, I don't care that much. She is not a very good representative of Idahoans. She put us out in front in terms of banning trans people from participating in sports and went on like a national tour to brag about it and help other states do the same thing. And, no surprise to Idaho 97 folks, the state has been sued over that and is probably going to lose. It's an ongoing lawsuit in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. ACLU, who are heroes at checking and balancing our state legislature, is bringing that lawsuit. She is facing Jeff Thompson, who is a former legislator. I think he's trying to come back to the House, I believe. And, you look at his website, like a lot of this research we do is looking for dog whistles. And so you look at Jeff's website and he doesn't have any racist or anti-gay dog whistles on there. He talks about teachers in his community, talks about the importance of education to rural Idahoans. And he does it in just a way that you expect of our Republican lawmakers in this state, in a respectful way. And he doesn't feel like he has to bow to this pressure that we're seeing nationally. So go, Jeff. And, I think Alicia said this earlier, but a lot of these far-right legislators are making plays for new spots, and this is a chance to get them out of office, particularly the statewide candidates. Next, we are going to look at District 14. Alicia, this is a pretty close to Treasure Valley, Eagle area district, I think.
Yes, coming in at number 6, we have the representative seat B race in District 14, which is the Eagle area. That's Josh Tanner versus Gayanne DeMordaunt. Now, Josh Tanner seems to be a responsible conservative. He serves his community in volunteer capacities and is currently a sitting fire chief, as I understand. He is a vast change of pace from Gayanne, who is the extremist threat in this one. Gayanne is one of the people who buddied up with Dorothy Moon to push school vouchers into the legislature this year. She was a champion of them in our committee hearings. And I would say the things that she had to say about public education were less than favorable, and she does not support it in any capacity. So it would be a vast improvement to get a great public servant into that seat. And so everybody should go check out Josh Tanner for District 14 in Eagle.
All right. And moving back out to Eastern Idaho, Rexburg area, I'd like Emily to talk about the District 34 race.
All right, District 34, thank you. So in this race, we have Britt Raybould versus Ron Nate. And I believe many of you will recognize the name Ron Nate. This time he is running against Britt Raybould, who has run in the past. We are very excited to see Britt, if she can show up in the legislature to serve there. We think she would do a fantastic job. One thing we wrote in our voter guide, she's not going to pass laws that force all of us to live by her religion, unlike Ron Nate. Ron Nate is known for bringing some of the worst legislation into the legislature and then holds forth strongly trying to argue with very bad arguments for his legislation. And I believe it's also somewhat disruptive on the floor of the House, does not necessarily respect the process or his colleagues in the way he does that. And this is a legislator, Ron Nate is a legislator that Idaho would do well to move aside from in this next election. And I hope we do that. I will hand it over to Mike.
All right. So I have District 35 in Driggs, and we're talking about Representative Place B, the race there, which is Josh Wheeler and none other than Chad Christensen. And I'll tell you what, it is time for a change. It is time to get Chad Christensen out of that office. And we picked Josh Wheeler. Josh supports education, and he opposes any attempt to dismantle education. It's amazing that we have to be at this level where we're like, hey, do you support public education, right? But that's how far these extremists are taking it. They're trying to destroy education. And Chad Christensen has a strong record of voting against public education in this state. And there's just so much about Chad Christensen that we can talk about. He's an Oath Keeper. He's a John Birch Society member. And you know, both of those ideologies are associated with anti-government extremism and white supremacy. Chad Christensen has just a ton of social media content that he has put up out there, which clearly is racist, which clearly shows that he has real problems with people who basically aren't white. And you know, that's just not the way that we want our leaders to be. He's also openly advocated for political violence. And he, I mean, this guy talks about his guns. He talks about shooting. He talks about shooting, you know, it's time to, do we have to like shoot people? Like one time people were so worried about what he said that they actually contacted Facebook safety because it was just this rant that was just crazy, and it almost sounded like he was wanting to sacrifice his children or something. And you know, we've got other things with Chad Christensen. Chad Christensen is the representative who did bunny ears on TV in the middle of one of his colleagues was speaking, and he put bunny ears up behind him. And this is just not the kind of sophomoric real idiocy that we need in there. And it's time for this guy to go. And I say this with no reservations, that Chad Christensen is the worst of this group. And I don't know if it's obvious to anybody, but I say, let's vote for Mr. Wheeler.
Right. I think we could talk about Chad all day on here. We're not going to, though, because we're not going to give him any more attention. We're going to move to the top three here, which are statewide races. And, you know, the legislative races are super important, and these are people that will represent your community. But the impact of statewide races is also very large. And so I think that's why we're going to finish up with three of the statewide candidates where there is a real threat to statewide office being taken over from the right. I'm going to talk about the Attorney General. We have a long-serving Republican Attorney General, Lawrence Wasden. I think I've read he's the longest-serving Attorney General in Idaho history. And he is a real lawyer. Like, he's there to do legal stuff. I don't always agree with, you know, the way he handles lawsuits, but we believe he understands the role of his position and takes it seriously. He doesn't just do what legislators want him to do or what the Idaho Freedom Foundation wants him to do. He does what he thinks is the correct legal path to follow. And I'm confident that he consults with Governor Brad Little and his other state officers in doing that job. He's being challenged by Raul Labrador, who's also a long-term Idaho Republican political figure, who most people probably recognize his name. Raul Labrador has been sort of courting the far right, progressive worse and worse since really the Tea Party days. And I was at the legislature in those days and watched him turn to the right, which is very disappointing. When he went to Congress for, I think, just one term, he was one of the original guys in the Freedom Caucus in Congress. And that trend of this, adding freedom to everything in air quotes is what got us to this place where we are today, where our democracy is really hanging by a thread. So I don't want to see Raul Labrador be our state's lawyer. I think Lawrence Wasden deserves another term. Anyone who is voting in the Republican primary should support him. And everybody across the state can vote in this race. It doesn't matter where you live. This is a statewide race. Let's look next at Secretary of State, which is also very essential to protecting Idaho elections. I think Alicia is going to talk about the Secretary of State.
I'm going to talk a little bit about your race first before I go on to the Secretary of State race at number 2. Something about the Attorney General's race that is really important to understand is Raul Labrador isn't the only extremist running in that primary. And Lawrence Wasden, who is a responsible conservative and has served Idaho well, is facing more than one extremist. And so we need to be very aware of this. This is a strategy of the far right that we're seeing litigation over in other states called ghost candidates. And the express purpose of running so many candidates in the statewide primaries is to draw votes away from a qualified candidate. I think this is a risky strategy. I wouldn't take it myself if I were a candidate, but it seems to be where the very far right is headed. So Idaho Secretary of State race is just like that. The qualified conservative is facing two high-profile extremist candidates that the far right would be happy if either of them got elected. So we need to be sure that we're voting for Phil McGrain in this primary election. He has a proven record of doing this exact work on the county level. And he is not buying into conspiracy theories, and especially those related to the big lie. The big lie is the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump won the election, and that is not true. Both Dorothy Moon and Mary Souza, who are up against Phil McGrain, are spreading this disinformation in our communities, and both tried very hard to suppress voters via legislation during the session. These women are bad for voting. They will restrict us if they can, and we should not let them anywhere near our sunshine laws, where the laws regarding campaign expenditures are located, because they cannot be trusted. So Phil McGrain for this race, and boo to Dorothy Moon and Mary Souza, who are not only against voting rights, but are active members of our participants in John Birch Society, Idaho Freedom Foundation, and other far-right radical organizations that do not align with Idaho values.
And I think that it should also be noted specifically for Dorothy Moon. She's shown a real willingness to be untruthful in things that she's done. She's made untruthful claims about teaching of CRT, and we actually called her on it. We filed a Freedom of Information Act or a public records request. They couldn't find anything there, and she's also claimed that Canadians are coming down and voting. I always think Canada Goose, these Canada geese coming down and voting, but she claims Canadians are coming down and voting here, and that's just simply untrue. And she's just really comfortable working in this world of really what are lies.
All right, Emily, what is the number one extremist threat race that we're looking at here?
This is the governor race between Brad Little and Janice McGeehan. And there are several other candidates running in the governor race on the far right side, but it does seem like the main person that Governor Little needs to beat is Janice McGeehan. What can we say about current Lieutenant Governor McGeehan? There are so many things, from the work she did last year to tear apart public education, from her strong allyship with white nationalists. She just has a whole bunch of things. And on top of that, she just doesn't even know how to run her office. She got into a big problem with not listening to the current AG on a records request recommendation that he made. And then she got into a lawsuit, and her office is it shut down at this point? Apparently, we just found out the phone number goes to some random recording, can't get a hold of her. She doesn't have any staff. Her budget is in a deficit. This is not what we need as a person running the state of Idaho. We need someone who can actually just manage their office. I think Governor Little can do that. He's demonstrated he can do that. And I will say, none of this means that we absolutely love everything Governor Little has done. That's not true, but we cannot have Janice McGeehan in office running Idaho. That would be a disaster for us. And so that is the race that we also need to be watching very closely and working to make sure that Janice does not become the person in charge.
Thankfully, this race was profiled very briefly in Politico this morning, and a recent poll has Brad Little at 30% over McGeehan. So, it could all work out. The interesting part of that write-up in Politico was that it was looking at candidates that Trump has endorsed, including McGeehan. And there's some hint that he's regretting some of those picks, including McGeehan, and maybe will be withholding his support in the future because she's such a terrible candidate. And, so look that up. Let's see. That was pretty heavy for a while there. I think we lightened it up talking about Janice a little bit. Everybody smiled a little bit. Mike, you had some honorable mentions, however. There's a few people we have to just mention.
Beyond the 10. And so the honorable mention is Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor race is Scott Bedke versus Priscilla Giddings. And we didn't include this in the top 10 because we all know that, as we like to call her, P. Giddy, Priscilla Giddings is extreme in really every sense of the word. That position of Lieutenant Governor carries very little power. Here we are. We're talking about Janice McGeehan and how her office is basically shut down. It's really not having any impact, right? It's just annoying. But Janice did nothing but waste our dollars that tried to do a dog and pony shows and that kind of stuff and gave us a bad name during her tenure. And so we're just saying, let's vote for Scott Bedke. He takes governing seriously. He takes the job seriously, just like Brad Little. Brad Little takes the job seriously. And these are the kinds of people we need in office right now to give our office a better image. And so as far as, our list of our top folks, that's it. The top 10 most extreme races in our mind, what we think happening in this primary election. Now you can go to our website, the idaho97.org, and look at the entire list that we have up there. And one thing, like I say this every time, vote. All right, you need to get out there and vote. And if you're registered for the Republican primary, get out there and vote and follow our list. And hey, if you're a Dem, right, go vote in the Democratic primary. But we all need to make a habit of voting.
Yeah, but we're going to continue. We've got some requests for a few races that we didn't cover in our voter guide. We're going to try to add those as best we can. And we also got a request for a printable version, which I think I can provide. I'm not sure, but really glad that people are reading it and using it and sharing it. You can find us at the Idaho 97 on all social media platforms from Twitter to TikTok. Follow us, please. Look for posts about these races and all kinds of political intrigue on there. Emily, we wanted to cover money real quick. Money in these races.
Yeah, I want to talk about money real quick. So, what we're seeing in these primary races is millions of dollars, some from in-state, a lot from out of state. And what we can see also is that some of that out of state money is going to the extremists on these ballots. And so, we don't really have $1 million to combat that, right? We've got a lot of work, a lot of volunteer work we put into some paid, a lot of volunteer work we put into this voter guide. And the only way we can really combat those millions of dollars is with people sharing this voter guide. That's a free action that you can take, and you can share it, send it to your email list, share it with your friends, send it to people who maybe don't usually vote in the primary, but you can send it to them and say, look, it's really important you show up and vote. If you're a Republican, to vote in this Republican primary this year, here's why. That would be deeply appreciated from us. It will do good for Idaho. And until we get $1 million, that's what we're going to have to do on this end. So please take some time and share the voter guide.
It's very optimistic too. You hear it. Until we get our $1 million. Yeah, well, that might not happen, but share, right? Our power is you. Our strength is you.
So if you go to voteidaho.gov, you can see all the information about the upcoming May 17th primary. You can still request an absentee ballot for a little bit longer. You can go and register on Election Day in Idaho. There are actually miraculously very few barriers to voting in this state, which is a great thing, and we want to keep that. You need to make a plan, however. Like, people don't just vote, like, it's not automatic, right? You have to make an effort. You have to figure out what you're going to do with your kids. You have to make sure every election day, I get 3 or 4 texts from people who are like, who should I vote for in this race? You should know that going into the polls. I mean, you can text me if you want. It's much easier if you get there and you just rattle them off. And that's what participating in democracy is all about. And that's what the Idaho 97 is all about. So we'll see you out on the internet. And thanks for listening to our podcast. Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
So long, everybody.